What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the Week 16 Domination Station NFL setup tutorial video where I'm just going to take some time to show you guys how to set up the Domination Station to attack this 3-game, and this works for all tournaments, all slates, but I haven't done one of these tutorials in a little bit. So I figured I'd come back for this beautiful 3-game slate we have for Week 16 on Saturday and show you guys how to set up Domination Station using the stacking system to do team stacks and game stacks and all kinds of snacks and stacks and all the good stuff. Plus, I got to do this shit for myself too. So I asked you during the Players Club video which you preferred. And I said, hey, hit me up in Slack and let me know if you want me to focus on Fanduel or DraftKings for this one. I'll be doing both. I want to attack. I love these 3-game slates. It's the playoffs. This is practice for the playoff slates, which are awesome as well. So I asked you guys, hey, which one do you want me to focus on? You said, hey, do Fanduel this time. You always focus on DraftKings. Fine by me. Let's do a Fanduel one. So here we go. What you see in front of you is the Domination Station Optimizer. And let's just start getting this bad boy set up for what we've got to do. I almost should show it to you on the beta server itself because it's so badass. We've made a few changes that for anybody who's checked out the current developmental server, we have some cool things going on. I feel like I want to show it to you. Wait, nah, I don't want to take time with that. But we got some cool things going on. We got logos in here. We've also moved the stacking options above this block over here so that you don't have to scroll all the way up every time you make adjustments. It's just like user experience things that you notice when you're playing it that you're like, oh, this is annoying. So somebody suggested that it was a great idea. That's on the beta server that we're currently testing, and hopefully maybe that'll go live next week. We're just debugging a lot of stuff because this current update also includes like saving settings and all kinds of other shit that really took a lot of programming and processing power, I guess, to put together. So it's a pretty long running update, but maybe next week we'll go live. Hopefully maybe before the season ends, and definitely by the time of the playoffs, we'll be working with that system. But functionally, it's the same. So we'll just get going. What we've done is we've loaded up on FanDuel the Saturday only slate, classic format. And you see here, there are 3 games. And we already broke down these games in the Players Club video for DFS Army VIPs. So we've already done that. But if you're just watching this video, hey, how do you stack lineups? What is this optimizer? I've never used it. It's really hard. I don't know how to use it. Tools are complicated. Of course they're complicated. That's why you're watching this video, because you want to learn how to do this. How do we attack mass multi-ante tournaments? How do people win the big monies? You got to do it like this. So obviously we've talked all season about correlation and game stacking and all those important things. And that is exactly the Domination Station Optimizer. It's very unique. It's set up very specifically to create lineups that look like tournament winning lineups. We studied what wins tournaments and we built an optimizer stacking tool that replicates that. So the first thing I like to do is go through position by position group and eliminate anything that I don't want to touch. So here is our position scanner. You got all quarterback. We're playing all 4 quarterbacks somewhat. Got all the running backs. We can remove anyone we don't want to use. There's pretty much no one on the slate that's completely untouchable. Yeah, I'm not seeing untouchable players anywhere. So essentially, we're going to leave the player pool complete. It's just 3 games. The projections themselves will drive a lot of these choices, and the stacks will be the secondary piece that drives the choices. So salary range, everybody in. Fantasy points range, we're not touching it. Salary cap range. Now, one crazy thing that people do to try to win tournaments like this is leave money on the table. You can force the tool to leave some salary on the table. That can work. That's how a lot of people, really with the 3-game slate, that is very much a legitimate strategy. And I don't mind if you wanted to run 100 lineups one way and then another 50 with leaving a lot on the table. That's a very, very sharp tournament approach. So keep that in mind. And guys, the idea of this is also Q&A. So if you have questions while I'm doing this, feel free to hit me with them. This is a tutorial. It's designed to teach you how to use the tool. Now, number of lineups we're going to be making today is 150. Okay, now here are some options on the side here that I always talk about. Optimal or tournament mode. We always use tournament mode. What that does is when you set a max exposure limit, it will spread that player throughout all of the lineups rather than just in the first 50 generated. If you don't understand what that means, don't worry about it. Just use it. There's an explanation here. I know nobody likes to read those, but it explains what it does. We always use DFS Army projections. How many uniques per lineup? I want to leave it 1. But you could use on a 2-game slate, you could do 2, 3. If you really wanted diverse lineups, I'm going to leave it at 1. Players versus defense. I usually leave this at 0. But again, on a 3-game slate, I don't mind using some players against their defense. So I'm going to put that on 2. Browser or server. The only difference between browser and server is faster. Much faster. The lineups are the same. Going to add some randomization to the mix, just 5%. What that does is just add a 5% random factor to every single player in every single lineup. And what that will do is if 2 players have about the same salary and one's like 0.2 points below the other one, it's basically the same thing. But an optimizer will always defer to the highest salary. So the randomizer just allows for a little bit more leeway, gets you a little bit more diversification. It's a plus or minus 5% range. Other options, we always leave the forced player last game. There's nothing to ever uncheck here. The disallow, we don't check that off either. We leave this exactly as it is. Flex positions, this week is not a priority running back in the flex week by any stretch. All of these running backs are big question marks. So we are going to leave it 100%. Let the projections drive it. I don't mind 2 tight ends. I don't mind 2. Weird shit happens. It's a 3-game slate. We don't want to make too many crazy rolls. Now let's start with stacking options. I've already broken down the players. So let's start with the stacking options. The universal rule, just basically quarterback, secondary stack. There's going to be so many secondary stacks. It's going to be irrelevant on this slate, but let's start setting up our stacks. And we want a lot of different versions. So the highest, I'm just not going to force secondary stacks. They're going to be there anyway. The highest projected player on the slate, the best game on the slate is obviously the Texans-Bucks game. So that's the one we're going to focus on now. Correlation boost. What are we doing here? Let's take a look at these players and try to figure out who correlates with Deshaun Watson. Carlos Hyde? No. As a matter of fact, Hyde is reverse correlation. If he's scoring touchdowns, then Deshaun Watson is not throwing for them. So generally, I don't want a Carlos Hyde in a lineup with Deshaun Watson. It's just not a play that I want to use, so I'm going to zero him out. Everybody else here is a pass catcher. They all correlate well with him. We're going to give him a little bit of a boost. What that does, the correlation boost, checking this box will boost the projection of all correlated players by 30%. Eric, that's one reason it's faster, but the other reason is legitimately it's happening server side. So we had to add a massive server with massive capabilities to use its superior processing power to make lineups faster than the original or browser-based, which essentially uses the power of your browser to make and to apply the algorithm and create the lineups. So essentially, when you're just making a few lineups, you could do it with your browser because it doesn't take much processing power. But when we're trying to make 150, the amount of processing power that it requires is beyond the level of what like the RAM in our browser can do quickly. So we send it to like a super powered server to do this. That's basically what that's all about. The reason I'm hesitant to have everybody using it is because the reason we have an option and it's not just automatically server side. I do like to see them being generated on screen so I could see who's being popping where. So I like the browser option, but more importantly, if we had like thousands of people hammering a server all simultaneous, it takes a lot of processing power, and then it could get overwhelmed and slow down. So we leave it default browser because most people are just making 5 or 6 lineups. And then those of us who are building 150 use the server side option. So yeah, it happens faster for that reason as well. All right, so game stacks and team stacks. I'm going to do a little bit of each. I don't think you absolutely must force game stacks in a short slate. I think you could do a little bit of each. So let's say we've got 6 quarterbacks to choose from. We're going to start to figure out how much exposure we want. The best guy on the slate is going to be Deshaun Watson. So let's say I want 30% Deshaun Watson. So I'm going to do 20% just team stacks, where game stacks will just happen naturally. And then, and that's not 20%. 20% of 150 is 30. 30 team stacks with Watson. And then I'll do another one with Watson of game stacks. These will be, and that'll be 15. So that'll level us out at 30 total percent, right? Now, game stacks. Game stacks include players from the Bucs. Now, Godwin is out. We're going to zero him out. The rest of these guys are all playable, and they're playable with, as part of game stacks, team stacks, all that good stuff. So we're going to apply the correlation boost. And part of what we try to do is you want to see what happens when you run it. But let me get the Jameis Winston ones in as well. Winston is the other popular. Let's say 25% Winston. So I'm going to do Winston. I'll do mostly game stacks. So 20% is 30 lineups. I'm going to do all game stacks with Winston. So what did we say? 25%, that's 40 total lineups. All game stacks. This is going to load up on players from this game. Again, we got a zero out Godwin, and we've got the rest of these guys all playable. Let's see, Jones a little bit higher. And then we're going to see what comes up, and we'll adjust. Turn off secondary. So we got Winston and Watson. So this is taking care of this one game. Now let's do a quick run, and it's not going to be that quick, but let's do a run of 150, and we'll see what starts to pop. Hopefully it's running fast, so we get an idea if we can do these example runs. Yeah, there we go. So, Eric, to your point before, it's pretty fast. Running 150 lineups. There we go. I mean, if we tried to do this in browser mode, we'd be waiting here for 6 or 7 minutes. So we're going to get our 150, and then I'm going to show you the output, what came up and how we start to adjust. First, we're going to really set up all of our various stacks, but you'll note that Watson is like just the guy who shows up most of the time. And I'm going to show you something here that's interesting. Even under universal stacks, you're getting. So what are universal? These are lineups that aren't affected by the forced stacks we set up here. Here we've set up 30 lineups of team stacks with Watson. We've got 15 lineups of game stacks with Watson, and we've got 40 lineups of game stacks with Jameis Winston. I haven't even gotten to the other games yet. How many total is that? 40 plus 45 is 85 out of 150. So more than half of our stacks so far are focused on this one very important game. We'll see where we get to. Now, one of the cool things we have going on with the Domination Station is you could fully control the stacks themselves. Now, take a look at this. When we look at the Deshaun Watson team stack, it goes Hopkins, Fuller, Duke Johnson, Hopkins, Fuller, Stills, Hopkins, Fuller, fell. But 83% of the lineups was this trio: Hopkins, Fuller, Duke Johnson. Now, I get why that happened. Duke Johnson is cheap, and when you put a correlation boost on him, he wants to pop in every single lineup. Where is that one? That's a team stack, right? Yeah, he's coming out 9 points, and he's cheap, and the whole reason. But I don't want most of these 30 lineups to have Duke Johnson in them. I don't love Duke Johnson as a play or a player. So I'm going to set a limit of him at 20%. He can only now show up in 20% of these lineups. Duke Johnson is fine. I don't mind having him, but I don't want him in every single lineup. So what you have to do after you run these is look at these percentages. Here is in the game stack, Watson game stack, you got a ton of Carlos Hyde, 60%. Now, did I not zero him out? I forgot to zero out Hyde. See, I just realized that, and that's why you see that, and you go, I don't want Hyde in stacks with Deshaun Watson. Or if I do, maybe 10%, but no more than that, because he is negatively correlated. So this would be like the contrarian craziness. And my preference is probably 0. But we have seen situations in single games where that could work. So we'll set that to 10%. So we don't want too much of that. Same deal in the game stacks. We don't want too much of Hyde. We're getting way too much of it. So even though Hyde is positively correlated with Jameis Winston, I just don't like Carlos Hyde against the Bucs. So we're going to limit that to about 15%. Just make sure that you're paying attention to these things, and or turn off the correlation boost. You don't need that. If you have the correlation boost off, you might want to force 2 players in instead. So if you didn't want to work with correlation boost, which is going to artificially raise up some of these projections, the other way to do it is just to force 2 with Watson. That works too. We could turn off the correlation boost and just force Watson with 2. Or 1. Or just do 1. I like 2. But you could do 1. Again, it's a 3-game slate, so it's not clear what type of approach is necessary. You can work a few different ways. All right, let's start to branch out. We've got our first 2 quarterbacks in. We haven't even messed with the player pool yet. Don't need to. So let's go to the second game of interest. We've got Garoppolo. Now, again, if we're going to stack Garoppolo, I need a minimum of 2. And we're going to leave the correlation boost off. I need a minimum of 2 players with him. Why? Because Garoppolo's not running for anything. He's not running for touchdowns. Now, the other thing with Garoppolo is I don't necessarily think that Raheem Mostert, Breida, or Coleman are positively or negatively, like crazy negative, but certainly not very positively correlated with him. I do think one of these guys could catch a touchdown, but your best bet is Kittle. Your second best bet is Debo. That's my bike Punk Samuel. And what I'm going to do, because I like Debo better than Manny Sanders in this game, as I broke down, is I'm going to make sure he's a little bit more, his projection is a little bit higher. Now, notice that I did the projections here in the projection box within the stack, not in the main player pool, although I'll adjust that as well. And the reason is, for the purpose of these stacks, it's only looking at these projections, not the main player pool projections. So changes there will not affect your stacks at all. Now, let's say we've got 85 lineups with the other guys. Jimmy Garoppolo is my next best, I think. So I'm going to go, let's go 20 Garoppolo lineups, right? Now, another thing we could do, by the way, is just let the tool do its own shit. So I'm going to leave some open for just the universal rule at the end. So I'm not going to fill out the full 150, because then we'll get these one-man stacks, which will be interesting too, and it will be different from the other stacks that we've got set up. So as I see, if it's defaulting mostly, for example, to Watson in those, I may lower the amount of 4 stacks I do with Watson and just allow them to be universal stacks. But this is the more controlled way. The easiest way is, if you don't want to do any of this, you could just leave the universal rule on. But I'm trying to set up mostly team and game stacks. Now, actually, you know what? I will let the universal rule cover some of that. Let's do 15, 10%, and we'll make them game stacks. So we'll do 10. We'll do 10 team. That's fine. At least 2. And then let's add in another rule, Garoppolo. We'll do 10 game stacks. Now, why are we doing game stacks? Like everything else. If Jimmy Garoppolo is having a big game, he's throwing a lot, right? Why is he throwing a lot? He's throwing a lot because the Rams are scoring and he's got to answer. Because we know that if the 49ers can sit back and lean on the run, they're going to do it. If they take a lead, they're just going to sit on the run. They're not going to throw a ton. So when are they throwing? It's when the opposing team is scoring. That's why when you're watching this game, when you want to understand why we team stack, when you're watching this game, right, and you've got Jimmy G, the thing you're rooting for more than anything, of course, we're happy for Jimmy G to throw a touchdown. But what we're really rooting for, especially early, is for the Rams to score a bunch of times. Because then you know, oh shit, he's going to have to answer. He's going to be throwing all game. We saw it happen when San Francisco took on the Cardinals both times, but especially the first time where the Cardinals just come out at home and they score like twice real quick. Next thing you know, they're up like 14-0, 14-7, 21-14. And the whole game, the 49ers have to throw because they're behind and then they tie it up, then they grab the lead. By the time they're comfortably ahead, they've been throwing the whole fucking game. So that's why game stacks work. It's because Jimmy Garoppolo is very positively correlated with the players from the Rams. So if I'm doing a game stack, let's do 2 players from the Rams. Let's get 2 players going from San Francisco. We turn off secondary. We don't need that. So that's a game stack. We've got 10 lineups there. 10 lineups on a team stack. No boost, but 2 players in it, right? Now let's bring it back around with Goff. Goff, I don't love him. Do you? No. I don't blame you. It's a bad situation. He's on the road. He's facing San Francisco, a very tough defense. Not a good spot. Not a good spot at all. But what if he does well? So we're building 150. We have to account for all these eventualities. So again, we're using our correlation-based stacking system. Game stacks, team stacks, you choose. And let's make 15, that's 10%. That's not a high number. 10% Goff lineups that are going to be all game stacked. No reason to team stack here. If the Rams are scoring, I promise you, there's a really good chance the 49ers are answering. And it's going back and forth. I don't expect it. These are your GPP. The expectation this week is, number one, that Watson and Winston are doing all the damage, and these other guys are just fucking turds. But just in case, we do 10, we do 15, 10%. Goff is always a guy I want to stack with 2. Who don't I want him with? Malcolm Brown. Not my fave. This projection on Gerald Everett is ridiculously low. I'm going to change that. Silly projection. So I'm going to change that. Higbee, probably too high, but let's see what the result is. And then we're going to bring it back around with 2 of these guys. We don't know which 2. Doesn't matter. We'll deal with that when we get to it. 1 or 2. I say let's do a full blast game stack, right? Let's see. Goff. We got Garoppolo. Last game. Brady. It's not pretty. I'm going to do 10 lineups with Brady just to do something. Don't like it. Don't love it. But what are you going to do? Brady is not positively correlated with Sony Michel. We take him out. The rest of it, I'm going to put a correlation boost because it's definitely only going to use one guy from these shitty-ass choices. I don't love the choices at all, but this is what we've got going on with this final game, 38-point slate. You could fully fade this game if you want. I mean, it's going to be low owned. That's the only reason to really, get into it. Actually, I'll do it as a game stack. Might as well with a correlation boost. Let's see what happens. I don't love anybody from either of these teams. My favorite players, I told you in the breakdown, is probably Mohamed Sanu and James White. So that's 10 lineups that way. And we'll add a rule to do 10 lineups with Allen. And then we're going to give it a run. So we're getting there, guys. We're getting to the fun part. And once we do the run, then we'll start to adjust the player pool. So here we go. Turn this off. Going to do a game stack here with Josh Allen. I don't even think you can force 2, so I'm just going to leave it with 1 and 1 from the Patriots. How many lineups? I don't know. Let's do 10. All right, so here we go. We've got every quarterback on the slate covered. Game stacks and team stacks, varying sizes. I'm going to give it a run. If you guys have any questions with what I'm doing as I'm doing it, I can see your typing in the comments section. So that's where you want to put your questions if you have one. In the meantime, here we go. We're running 150 lineups, and we haven't even gotten to messing with the player pool yet. This is just setting up our stacks, getting all that going, and, giving it a run. Now, one of the cool things when you're done with the run is you can see all the different combinations. Now I've got Hopkins and Fuller 86% of the time. Remember before it had Duke Johnson in so many. Now it reduced. So this is another one. I love the combo. I think it's great for team stacks, but I'm not sure if I want 30 lineups or 25 lineups all with that combination. So, I'll put a limit on it. Let's say 55%. I do like it, but I don't need it 100%. And remember, we can set a max limit on any combination. What else? Okay, Tom Brady game stack, Edelman and White, opposing Brown and Singletary and Beasley. Oh my God. I got a correlation boost on this one. Yeah, that's too many players from that one game. So I'm turning it off. I'll try to do that again. Jared Goff game stack, Gurley, Everett, Kittle. Too much Everett. I guess adjusting that projection way higher had a pretty negative effect. So that's the Goff. Yeah, 8.9 was too high. Let's go 5.5 here, and hopefully that will look a little bit better. Too much Everett. I do like Kittard and Mostert. I want to increase Debo. Yeah, there's one Manny Sanders. I'm not upset about that. So basically what I'm doing right now is I'm just looking over these stacks and making sure that none of them look like stupid. Okay, so here's a Watson game stack. Hopkins, Fuller, plus Watson and O.J. Howard. Here's another Hopkins, Fuller, plus Jones, O.J. Howard. Hyde, Fuller, plus Watson. I don't like that one. I'm giving that a 0. Can't have Hopkins with just Hyde. I can't have Watson with just Hyde. Hopkins, Fuller, Cameron Brate. Fuller, Duke Johnson, Justin Watson, Ron Jones. You know who's not showing up? Bashard Perriman. So that tells me Bashard Perriman has too low of a projection to show up in any lineups. Now, I want Bashard Perriman, even though I don't love him this week, and I've already told you guys why on the breakdown video. I want some exposure anyway, so we're going to have to raise it up. Make sure we get some Bashard Perriman. Raise it up. Make sure we get some Bashard Perriman. He's not showing up. Let's see where else we're at. I'm going through position group by position. Let's see how many universals we get in here. 6% game stack. Not many. So we filled up most of our stacks. Winston game stacks. Lots of different ones. Oh, I like this. Lots of different variations. Again, need more Perriman, so hopefully that will come up in the next run. Players. Let's take a look at our player combos if we're getting too much of any one guy. So this is the next thing we have to work on. We got Singletary against the Patriots. Do I really want on Fanduel 84% exposure to Devin Singletary? The answer is definitely not. He's good price. I get it. 6,400. He's cheap, but he's going up against the number one rush defense. He's on the road. There's nothing good about this matchup. So I'll go 35%. Let's see who else we can get. Right? Todd Gurley, another situation. I'm not sure this is a great spot for Todd Gurley. Set at 40%. Why would it be a great spot for Todd Gurley? What are some projection ownerships? Raheem Mostert we like, but he's not showing up nearly enough. So I'm going to change him to 12. Let's see what happens. Let's give it another run. Actually, let's take a look at the defenses too. I'm getting a lot of Rams. You know, I'm not getting the best one. Patriots, because I got too much Rams. So that's a lot of Rams. Do I need that much Rams? No. I'm going to take a look here. Patriots are the top dogs, then the 49ers. Should get a lot more 49ers, a lot less Rams. So I'm going to change this, let's say, to 15%. I'm going to raise this up a little bit. Let's see what happens. All right, so here we go, giving another run. So as you see, and this is very, very important if you're paying close attention, Michael had a dream that he won 50K by playing Brady. Go with that, dude. Go with it. Play some Brady. Don't play Brady in your high dollar, but he's at home. Maybe it's late in the season. Maybe we get some vintage Brady action. He's at home. Play some. Nothing wrong with it. Nothing wrong with playing Brady. He hasn't been great. I really do think it's going to be Watson or Winston, but you never know. All right, so take a quick look at my exposures. I like these exposures pretty well. It's mostly focused on Watson, little Jameis, then a little bit less Garoppolo, and then down the list as the plays get worse and worse. I'm very comfortable with that situation. Now we're starting to mess with our running back exposures. Got way too much Ron Jones Jr. here. Gonna do a little bit of control on that. I like Ron Jones Jr., don't get me wrong, but I don't want that much of him. You start to set your max limits, and that's going to set things up for you. Again, getting a lot of names here that I don't love, so we've got to make some adjustments. I said already, I kind of like Debo. I said already, I kind of like Mohamed Sanu. I like Cooper Kupp. I like DeAndre Hopkins, of course. I like Will Fuller, but I don't like him 97% of my lineups. I love Will Fuller, though, but I just don't love him in 97% of my lineups. So we're going to have to make an adjustment there. Watson, 71%. That's a lot, especially on Fanduel. Fanduel is very, very touchdown dependent. So just having a guy with volume where this might work better on DraftKings won't work as well. Let's take a look at the cheat sheet, the Fanduel one. Yeah, you want to get some Cup in there. You want to get some Woods. You want to get a nice mix, a little more Bashard Perriman, all of that. So the best way to do it is just control the max exposures. Get them where you want it. Do I want more than 50% Fuller? Probably not. This guy could get hurt in game anytime. You don't want to get too heavily exposed to someone like that. Let me take a look at some wide receiver numbers. Edelman, I already told you guys that I want to go a little below the market on Edelman compared to other people. Let's see where we end up. Watson, I like Watson as a play, but I mean, let's not go crazy. Not 70%, especially not on FanDuel. Let's call him 35% or 40% or something like that, where we'll be way over the field. But I want a lot more of some of these other names. So especially Cooper Kupp. I mean, come on. So let's give this another run, and let's see what happens. Nice and quick. these lineups get run. I love it. So here you go. And you're starting to see, and I want everybody to pay attention, that these things are starting to come together, right? They're starting to come together. Here's something interesting. We allowed tight end in the flex, and we're getting a lot of it, right? Because the tight end percentage numbers, you got 150, 160% tight ends. We're going to control it. George Kittle is probably one of the best overall plays on the slate, which is why I'm comfortable having a lot of him there. But note that everything's game in team stacks. You can't get away from it. Patriots, Sanu, Buffalo, New England. There's only 3 games, so you don't have to worry about it too much. Each position, there's Sanu. We had to raise him up, but now he's showing up way too much. I don't want any Patriots wide receiver 71%. We want to focus on the guys from the good games. Perriman, Watson. Look at Perriman. Still too little. I want mostly Perriman in my game stacks, though, with Winston. So obviously it's still too low. Let's take a look at our, the challenge here is you have to look at these players from a game stack and a team stack point of view. Deshaun Watson, Hopkins Fuller, DeAndre Hopkins Fells, Hopkins. That's way too much Fells. Hopkins Duke Johnson, Hopkins Stills, Fuller Duke Johnson. We don't want 100% Hopkins either. White, Edelman, Jared Goff. We've got these different stacks. You got to look through each and every one and make sure that you're comfortable with these combinations, right? A little Cooper Kupp going. I want to raise a little Cooper Kupp. I want a little bit less Gurley. So let's go to my Jared Goff game stacks, right? I want a little more Cooper Kupp, a little less Todd Gurley in these. Josh Allen shouldn't be like heavily Devin Singletary stacks. I'll give him 25%, but we want Beasley and Brown more. Frank Gore is a 0. Got to get rid of him. Can use him a little bit. These guys are 0s. Look at our defenses. So I'm just going through each position group piece by piece. That's way too much Texans. I like the Texans. That's too much. So let's go 25. I like them. There's 100% of defense to allocate. I would like most of it to go on the Patriots, some of the Texans, some of the 49ers, and a little bit on the Rams, no more than 50%. So let's see how that works itself out. George Kittle, 90%. I think it's high for George Kittle. I like George Kittle, but I'll go. He's far and away the best tight end on this entire slate, but I'll still go 70%. He's still a pass catcher, right? We're getting up to where we want to be with some of these other guys. I've lowered his projection just a little bit. So let's give this another run and see where we wind up. And this is the process of setting up the domination station. I'm about 30 minutes into this, 35 minutes in. And for a 3-game slate, I'm probably 75% of the way there. At this point, what I have left to do is tinker, try to mess with the exposures, look at the combinations that we're getting in our exposures box here at the bottom. Make sure the combinations are combinations I like. You might say, Kevin, this seems too fucking complicated. I don't want to do it. It's too complicated. I'm going to show you a trick where it's not complicated, where it's very simple. And you might like that better. So I'm actually going to show you a trick that you can use that you might like better because it's easier and faster. This is the complicated way. This is the user control way, right? Here we're controlling everything. It's not nearly enough Cooper Kupp. So like I said, we're controlling everything here. Where's my Goff? Cooper Kupp doesn't want to show up. Why? My 2 favorites with Goff. I'm going to raise them up. This will increase my exposure to these guys. I want Kupp. I want more Woods. This will increase my exposure to these guys. But I'm going to show you a trick in a moment here that I think is going to be very, very interesting for you guys. Actually, let me bring in... I'm going to keep running this, but I'm going to show you a little trick here. So give it one more run. And what I'm going to do is show you a trick on the DraftKings side. All right, here's the Domination Station. You guys want to see a trick? I just want to learn a simpler way that probably work just fine. Will work just fine. I'm going to show you something. This is DraftKings real quick. And this is just a trick. We've set it up so that you can get complicated. And that's what I'm doing with the tutorial, showing you how I do it. But there's a very simple way also. And it's called the universal rule method. And here's how it works. Stacking options, universal rule, stack quarterback with at least one wide receiver tight end from the same team, include a secondary stack. All good. Don't add any rules. All we have to do from here is go to our quarterbacks and set the exposures as we want them. Oh, this is the main slate. Wait a minute. Saturday only is what we want. So let me show you this trick real quick here, guys. Simpler way. Correlation stack, universal rule enabled. Same thing we just did before, except this time we're only going to set quarterback exposures. We're going to go by percentage, 30%, 35% Watson, 25% Winston. That's 40, 60% total. We've got 75, 85, 95, 100, right? Now, this is too much, so I'm going to reduce this to 30, reduce this to 7, reduce this to 8, raise this to 10. Done. 30, 45, 55, 70, 80, 95-ish, right? That's it. Tournament mode, 150. Server, 2 players versus defense. Done. Check this out. Just run it. You don't need to set up team stacks and game stacks. You don't have to be complicated about it. The game stacks will just naturally occur. Similarly, you could try 1-in-1. You can run 150 one way with heavy game stacks and 150 another way with just simple quarterback wide receiver stacks. Now check this out. Look at these lineups. They're pretty fucking nice. Watson, Hopkins, and then a triple stack here of Gurley, Kittle, and Samuel. All good. We got Watkins, Fuller, Hopkins. That's a triple stack. Kittle, Gurley. Combination. Rams versus and against. I mean, it's giving you beautiful game and team stacks here without having to be all complicated about it. Got the quarterback exposures exactly where we asked for them. Now we could just deal with our players individually. Note that everything I did in terms of adjustments to the player pool reflects over from, because this is also Fanduel apparently. Yeah. So it reflects over from what I was doing before when I was using the full game stacking system. But these are very nice options. You're getting everybody that you want, exposures where we want them. Increase the number of uniques will get us a bigger spread, and you'll see that now as I run it again. Notice it's really quick. This was really quick and easy. Doesn't take a whole lot of setup time. The only thing we're going to do is adjust our player pool as necessary, just to make sure we're not overexposed to any one player. like Raheem Mostert, 65%, blah, blah, blah. We got, Hyde, I might not want more than 10% of him, stuff like that, where we want to just make sure we're not getting overexposed to any one player. I can go 65% there. I like Debo Samuel. That's my punk. So we're getting a lot of the exposures we want here without having to do too much manipulation. Three uniques actually kind of worked pretty well for this. OJ Howard, 50%. Do I want to stake half of my day on OJ Howard? No. So I'm going to mix that up a little bit. Patriots defense, Texans, yes, fine. San Francisco, LA Rams, no more than 50%. This is looking pretty good. Like what I might end up doing is throwing this group into one contest and the other group with the game stacks into another contest. There's a lot of awesome contests, by the way, to enter. I just want to show you guys real quick while we're looking at this. Check out the lobby on Fanduel, because we're talking Fanduel today. If you check out the lobby on Fanduel, again, as I'm running those lineups, you'll see that NFL for the Saturday slate, Fanduel has some really good ones. A $2, a quarter game, a nickel game, a $9 if you want to pay up, a 444, only 16K entrance. Not in love with the size of that one. And there's a dive here where you could do 150 for $150. So there's a lot of different options for all price levels. Nickel, quarter, $2, $1, $4, $9. You got everything. Whatever you need. A lot of different options. Here are the finished lineups. Again, do we want 75% Raheem Mostert going up against the Rams? I mean, he's playable, but I'm gonna set a limit. That's what you do. Debo, I get it's his bike. I know. I ain't scared of Debo. He tell me shut up, I be quiet. But when he leaves, I be talking again. I like Cooper Kupp. Let's get a little more Bobby Woods. I want to raise this up a little bit so that we get more. I want to raise up Bashard Al-Perriman so we get a little bit more. That's all. And run it again until you've got those exposures where you want them and you're done. All right, guys. Any questions about these two tutorials? We showed you a simple way using just the universal rule. We showed you a more complex way setting up the actual stacks individually. This is a beautiful thing. As you've seen, you can go in the completed stacks and control the combinations. You can set limits on these combinations. You have complete control over the types of stacks that you put out there. This is a nice one. How about Goff, Kupp, Woods, Kittle, Mostert? Okay. I could see it. Mostert, Samuel. Okay. Got a Kittle, Samuel? Give me a Kittle, Samuel. I need a Kittle, Samuel. That's the thing. I'm missing it. You control it. You see one that's popping too much? You can control it. I like it when they're all really different. So I get every different kind of combination that I can find, or as many as possible. I hope this helped, guys. Let's take a look at this other run I did. I never looked at the combinations. Yeah. Watson Hopkins, some Watkins Fuller, some with the both. This is a really good spread. A little too much, a little too little Perriman. So what that tells me is Perriman still needs to be brought up. Again, I don't love Perriman. I told you why on the video breakdown, but that doesn't mean I want no Perriman. I just think he's going to be high owned and probably less likely to do what people think. But that doesn't mean I want no exposure. What if he does go off? I don't want to ruin my day based on that. So yeah, I like Watson too. What if Watson has a bad day though? You know what I mean? So like, give me some Perriman, sure. Goff universal stacks here. It's giving you a little Goff Higbee, a little Goff Kupp Woods. It's a little Woods, a little Kupp Woods. All these different combos. Edelman Sanu, Edelman and Sanu. There we go. Lots of different. I don't love Edelman. I've already told you guys, so I'm actually going to lower his projection a little bit. And that's it. Anyway, we'll shut it down there. I will continue to tinker and put these lineups in eventually. You get the idea. I want you to bring your own ideas. So my final thought is when you're running 150, consider who the chalk will be. Consider what it's going to take to win the tournament. And a lot of times you're going to have that perfect combo. Something weird is going to be required. Maybe you're going to have to leave some salary on the table. Maybe you're going to have to do a strange combination. Maybe you're going to have to play players versus the opposing defense. Something unique. And try to do something unique with your lineups as you're setting this up. Get a player in there, go heavier on somebody, go lighter on someone than you think the field is going to be on. Something unique. So that's what's going to take to win one of these. All right. Good luck, everyone, tomorrow. Let's crush it. 3-gamer. I love it.